Well, hello, everyone. My name is Derek Johnson. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for BGW Architects, Building God's Way. Joining me are David Tyson, one of our Senior Project Architects, and Austin Fredrickson, our Senior Preliminary Designer. Dave and Austin have been involved in leading preliminary designs with hundreds of churches around the country. And we have a really unique process that we use to do that. We call a charrette over a 3-day period. If you're not familiar with that, we're not going to really go into that process, but there's plenty of information on our website. We'd invite you to check that out at bgwservices.com. We also offer some other video content on there that'll explain that a little further. The experience, though, that David and Austin have gotten through these charrettes have really given them a unique perspective and an understanding about the needs of ministries and how that translates into spaces and facilities. And today's webinar is really a second installment in a series that we're calling Things They Don't Teach You in Seminary. And we've realized over the years that, we've come across so many churches that are unfamiliar with a lot of this information. And seminaries just don't offer a lot of courses or any at all on facilities management or design and construction, things like that. So it can be difficult for church leaders to really navigate this path on their own. So our goal in this webinar series is really to address some of those common concerns, a lot of the frequently asked questions that we get a lot out in the field, a lot of the concerns we're hearing as we meet with churches across the country. Today's webinar in this series is called 5 Things You Should Do Today to Sharpen Your Building's Effectiveness. And I think this really applies to any ministry. It's not just those that are on the verge of a building project, but these are some things that every ministry can be doing today to ensure that their building is an effective ministry tool, that they have a clear plan for the future. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Austin, and he's going to get us started with some of these tips and strategies that can help you along the way.
So the first thing we want to talk about here today is a budget for the building. There's a couple different ways you can look at this, but really what we're saying is your facility is a living, breathing thing. It grows, it gets worn out, it gets broken down, it needs some TLC every now and then. And so we want to encourage people to be thinking about putting some funds towards the facility, because it really is a critical path forward to growing your ministry. And so you can think creatively about this. First of all, creative budget. Styles change, trends change. There's new concepts for ministries, new technologies. And so we would encourage you to position yourself in such a way that you're ready to adapt to these different things, whether it's kids check-in systems or safety protocols or marketing and signage and all these different things. Have some money put aside for a creative budget. Secondly is building upkeep budget. Obviously, with this, with the curse of sin in this world, things just wear out and decay and fall apart. And if we're not planning for those upkeep items, things are just going to get worse over time. So like your home, you save money, you plan for maintenance, you don't wait till it's too late. And some churches, so some churches that we work with, they've deferred things for many years, and Dave can attest to this. They said, well, we should have replaced the roof 5 years ago, but we were waiting to go through this process to make sure we weren't wasting money. And then they've got buckets around, picking up leaks and stuff like that. So we just encourage you to put in the work, budget for it ahead of time, keep your facility up to date. Because we'll say when we get there, we didn't want to spend money that would be wasted. And that's the importance of having a master plan. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But if you have that master plan in place, then you can more appropriately plan for the future. Should we do a new roof, or is this going to be replaced when we do something in the future? Should we add parking here, or is the building going to expand this way? That's why you should be thinking about a master plan.
Yeah, and I just kind of piggyback on that with the two things is we kind of mentioned having a creative budget and a building upkeep budget. It's important to have both of these. The building upkeep, again, it's just beneficial to have that because otherwise you can't. Churches will have a hard time doing a building campaign to replace a roof or to change the insulation out or redo drywall or something like that.
Right.
but you've really got to get those things kind of put into place. And when you can do that, then it makes moving from phase to phase and doing the next steps a lot easier, or doing a building campaign. Those things come across a lot easier when that stuff is just built in and ready to go. I think then so that's kind of point one when we're thinking about sharpening your building's effectiveness is building that budget, getting those budgets in place for that kind of stuff. The second one is cleaning out the old. When we go on these preliminary designs, Austin and I, inevitably the question comes up when we're doing this. It's well, we need more storage space. The building that we have is great, but we need more storage, and that happens a lot of times even with churches that we design. We get to the end of the process and they say everything works great except we could use more storage. Churches are really notorious for having stuff left over. If you have an extra couch, bring it to the youth. They'll take it and they'll put it in their youth space. Or we may have Christmas decorations from 20 years ago that we don't know what happened and who used them, but we better not get rid of them because somebody might need them at some point. And so the second topic is, man, just clean out the old. If you're thinking in King James terms, if it's free, it doesn't have to be for thee. Churches are notorious for this. And so my encouragement on this is something that we've kind of heard a little, you hear sometimes in the business world, but we need to have a 5-year cycle of change. And that time frame isn't necessarily the key as much as the cycle of change is the key. You'll hear different things about, well, it should be a 3-year, well, it should be a 5-year, maybe it's a 10-year. It's probably for churches, we ought to be thinking about things in a 5-year cycle of change, where we think about, hey, how long is this decoration, or how long is this couch, or how long has these things been, how long have we been using these? How long is the backdrop behind the stage? How long has that been, we've been using it? Do we have a plan in place to kind of continue to cycle that change through and say, hey, it's time to refresh this, and let's cycle this area through in a 5-year. Maybe we'll do something different on our backdrops. I've seen churches that they change their backdrops every couple months, or with a new series or something like that. And so it doesn't have to be that time, but a lot of times when it comes to the overall space and whatnot, it's that 5-year cycle of change kind of works really well with that concept of getting rid of the old and keeping things fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. So then point 3 here would be just try something different. You can get into these patterns of just doing status quo, but try something different. First of all, the congregation needs to get used to change. So congregations that are very resistant to change will seriously struggle to get through an expansion. So start now, especially if you have an older congregation, start getting them used to change. So, we have these struggles of what about pews or chairs, or I've seen arguments about, should we take down the steeple or leave it? Those sorts of questions can get answered a lot easier if you just start trying stuff. So maybe it's something small, maybe it's something you just do to see if people even notice. You change one piece of furniture, this little area, maybe you paint a wall or something like that. And it's usually easier to try and change things like in kids areas. You could paint the kids hallway or the children's check-in area, switch out signage, but just find that low-hanging fruit and start making changes, get people used to it. Because if there are people in your congregation going, well, it's been this way for 50 years and it's worked fine, those are the same people that you're going to have some hurdles to get through once you really start talking about some major changes. So just get people used to change. And I think it's just healthy in general for ministries to hold loosely to the things that don't really matter in the end.
Yeah, I was going to say, additionally, the other thing is it starts to foster this sense of creativity when we start to offer the option. Let your team be creative. Let them kind of exercise those ideas, and let's see what comes out above through that. Create a community that fosters that creativity through that.
So along with that creativity, you have people in your congregation that have ideas. And so we would encourage you just to pour into those people to say, hey, if you think we could be doing this better, let's try it, for 1 week or a couple of weeks or a month or whatever, let's try this. And you can really disciple people through that, let them make mistakes, learn some things, like whether it's the backdrop or accent walls or signage or different things like that, you probably have creative people that want to get involved, so you can shepherd people along that way and learn some things. And additionally, by trying new things, freshness is just a really good thing to have in a church. When you walk into a space, any space, you get a certain feel from it. You know, you think about how you feel when you walk into someone's home who's really hospitable. Use those people, the people with the hospitality, to think critically about how it feels when you walk into the church, to make people feel welcome, to have that sense of newness, to sense movement, things are happening here and it's exciting. And you can do that through your facilities really easily.
Yeah. So then point number 4 is developing a master plan. And really what we're doing here is we're beginning to identify what are the priorities as we move forward. Where are we going? You know, and I'll talk to a group a lot of times and I'll say, you know, it really comes down to who do we want to be when we grow up? You know, where do we want to be in 10 years from now? What does that look like? And then we begin to take steps back to set that. And doing that gives us kind of a conceptual next step. So instead of just having maybe a list of words of things that are important to us and where do we want to go, we begin to kind of visually depict this. And this can help kind of flesh out the idea of a roadmap and where we're going and that kind of stuff with the priorities. The other thing that it does is sometimes when there's, you know, financial issues that obviously are going to arise, we may have this great concept to go towards a large auditorium in the future. And that's awesome. We have that vision out there and that's important. But in the meantime, there's probably some smaller steps that maybe it's not the ultimate goal, but it is things that need to happen. There's pieces that need to take place in that master plan. And that master plan begins to identify that and say, hey, here's the different pieces that even though we've got this great vision, there's 10 other things in the meantime that we need to really try and hit on. And we can start to attack those and get ready for those to take place in the meantime. And so doing that is a really great kind of while we're waiting, or ways to kind of keep things sharp. And as Austin mentioned earlier, it helps us to kind of, as we think about the building upkeep and budget, helps us kind of understand what areas are going to be critical path that, hey, we've got to keep the roof on this space in great condition, or we've got to, you know, spend a little extra money to paint some of these areas because it's going to be valuable, not just in phase 1, but once we get to phase 10 at the same time. And so those kind of things, when we think about a master plan, are really important. And that really gets into kind of a little bit about, Derek, you mentioned this earlier about the charrette process, who BGW is and how we go about doing that. And again, on the BGW website, you can find a lot of information about that charrette process. I think it's really valuable as far as creating momentum, developing that master plan, and really getting a vision for what you want to do as a ministry with the buildings that you have, not just the buildings you currently have, but the buildings you plan for in the future.
Great. So then the 5th point here would be setting up a building team. It's never too early to start scheming, brainstorming, really determining that vision and how to move forward. And we've done several talks on this, and we've got a blog post we can link you to that goes into this in detail. But really, this is about having the right team. And having the right team is critical to having an effective building process. If you have good input, you have better output, right? So these folks are in a position to make your job really difficult or really easy. And so getting the right people in place here is going to be really mission critical moving forward. I've got one story I'd like to tell in regards to this. I won't name names or say where this church was, but I worked with a church about 5 years ago, and we did a design charrette for them. And they had somebody they invited to be on the building team who had been going to the church for about 3 months. And the pastor told me, well, this guy's really wealthy business owner, and he was just a part of another church building process. He ended up leaving the church through that process, and now he's here to help us out. And I just thought, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. Well, it's been 5 years since we did that. We parted ways with them because this guy thought they could do it cheaper, and the building still isn't built. And I think they ran into some bad advice there. And I really wanted to sit down with that pastor and say, hey, you don't know this guy. You don't know him. Just because he's wealthy, just because he has a successful business doesn't mean he's necessarily a good partner for your church. And when he came back to us and said, well, we need to do this cheaper, we need to do this, we need to do that and that, and we tried to work with him through the process, and he just blew the whole thing up. That's just kind of a warning to say, it's not always the guys with the most money. It's not always the guys who, you know, have that go-getter entrepreneurial attitude that are best for the team. They could be, but it's really about the heart. And so we want to make sure that the people on this team are like-minded with the right vision and are really on board with the vision moving forward and aren't going to cause trouble. Because just because somebody has experience or they've done X, Y, or Z doesn't mean they might be right on your team. So you want to have a good diversity of a team. You want to have the men and women in place that'll give you the right input to get the right output.
Yeah, so important, that final point. I mean, all these 5 points are really important, but you know, if you want to learn more, like David was saying, there is a blog post on our website, and it actually has a video of a presentation in there that we did at our one of our seminars this past year. The 5 keys to forming an effective church building committee, and some really good tips in there, strategies, some of what Austin talked about finding the right people who are committed to what you're trying to get accomplished, good diversity of ages, good cross-section of different people from your church is so vital to getting various input, and not just getting people with experience, but unexperienced people as well. They bring a fresh perspective and a unique perspective. Everyone brings different ideas to the table. So that's such an important part. Thanks, Dave and Austin. This has been great. We want to keep these short, and so we appreciate you doing that. These are some great insights and tips. Thanks to everybody that will be watching this webinar. We hope that this is information that's helpful to your ministry, and that'll kind of get the wheels turning as you're thinking about the future of your ministry facilities. You know, it'll kind of get some ideas churning in your mind. You can find other installments, like I said, of this webinar series on our website at bgwservices.com. And what we're going to do is place them in the blog section, where we have some content in there, some different videos, and you can also find this on our YouTube channel. But until the next time, we thank you for joining us, and appreciate you giving us your time, Dave and Austin, and thanks, everybody.